do with keeping people from recommitting crimes, getting people into jobs, making sure people are paying their fees on time, various factors like that.
Well, say a little bit more about this proposal. Give an example of how it might work.
Well, like I said, if someone is coming out of jail right now, they go into a probation or parole system. And currently we know there's a lot of ways that these things are being carried out that are actually harmful for somebody trying to get back on their feet. So let's say that you're someone coming out of prison and you're trying to get back on the right track and you're working a job, but you have to leave your job at 3 p.m. once a week to go meet your parole officer 30 minutes away. Well, it's pretty hard to hold down a job if you're having to leave in the middle of the day to go meet the disability requirements. And so we have a lot of things that we know are structurally wrong with these systems that actually do lead to people falling back into life of crime because we make it too hard for them to get back on their feet and just do the right thing. And that's because the incentives are wrong. So essentially this bill would do a test pilot program that we think would show that there's better ways to structure these systems. And instead of them getting their lump sum up front and just getting paid off of who's in the system, they instead would get like that 75% to carry out the basic duties that they need to do operationally. And then 25% of the funding would come once they meet metrics. So that's saying that you get someone who's currently on parole, into employment, or you have people in your parole system, certain percentage that go a certain amount of time without recommitting a crime. Or you have people who are, meeting different educational requirements. There's various factors, but basically leaving a lot of that up to the systems themselves to work and decide what those factors should be and how they can best help people get back on their feet, but providing the funding when they hit those metrics.
What kind of opposition has this bill faced?
Not significant. I think it's a pretty common sense reform, and I think there's a lot of people that realize that we need these sort of sensible actions, and I don't think we've had significant opposition to it.
And there's no, is there a large funding cap? Is there a large funding requirement for this bill to pass? In other words, is it expensive to the state? Does it add money to the state's needs?
No, it does not add money to the state's needs. It's because it's already something that the government is paying to do. It just simply restructures how they're funded.
Well, what else is on the agenda, Hannah Cox?
Lastly, for this year, we are working on a juvenile justice package, and this was actually introduced by the governor. We are working to make sure that we have common laws across the state. Right now, there's a lot of hodgepodge laws. So if you are a juvenile and you get in trouble for something like truancy, or you get in trouble for breaking your parole, one county might really throw the book at you and give you very stringent punishments and perhaps even put you in jail for that, while others might give you a slap on the wrist. And so it's kind of, very different from place to place how juveniles are treated. A lot of them that were taken out of their homes for minor nonviolent crimes. And what we know is that when you put someone into a prison and they spend time around more hardened prisoners, all you're doing is helping them find, new people to commit crimes with, new ways to do crimes. You're just increasing the chances that crimes are going to escalate and they're going to end up back there. And so this bill would essentially try to make sure that we're keeping juveniles in their homes with their families and in their communities, working with community-based programs to try to help them get back on the right path, make sure that there's an addiction or mental health issue that's being treated and addressed, and making sure that we aren't, exposing them to more hardened criminals early on.
What does your now your group has Braden Busek is one of the attorneys. What litigation is he involved in right now on behalf of the free market in Tennessee?
Yeah, well, we still have a couple of ongoing cases that are moving their way up. So we're still working on the Airbnb issue, the short-term rental properties issue, and appealing that up. So that's continuing to be ongoing. And then we also, of course, still have our home business case that we're working on here in Nashville, which I think I talked to you about before. And that deals with the fact that currently in Nashville, you cannot have a home business whatsoever, meaning you can have anyone who's coming to your home and paying you for any kind of service, whether that be giving piano lessons or teaching yoga, cutting people's hair, on and on and on. And so that's ongoing. We had our first victory in that case. About 2 weeks ago, the city had filed a motion to dismiss, and that was thrown out by the judge. So we are moving full steam ahead on that.
And will there be a trial disputing the facts, or is it all just a matter of law, Hannah?
It's a matter of law. These are constitutional cases. They don't have a jury trial like you might suspect. And they will move on through court proceedings.
Okay, and the facts are stipulated. There's not an argument about what the facts are, which would require a jury.
Right. They're more constitutional claims, claiming that these laws are unconstitutional and violate people's rights.
We're talking with Hannah Cox of the Beacon Center. Hannah, how can my listener find out about about your work or subscribe to your email newsletter?
Yeah, they can go to beacontn.org and sign up for our newsletter. They can also find all kinds of research and media and materials there that can help them find out more about the different policies that we're working on. And then, of course, we're really active on Facebook at BeaconTN as well.
BeaconTN.org. And Hannah Cox, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This is David Toulis. We've been talking with Hannah Cox of the Beacon Center. Now, that organization is doing the kind of work that we need to have done here. But of course, when it is involved in litigation and legislation, that benefits us as well. And one of the main efforts of Beacon Center is the pushing back of the whole permitting and licensing world that grew out of the progressive era, beginning in the late 1800s, the era that effectively toppled the right to work, the right to do business framework of American commerce and American industry, and bringing to Tennessee one of the thickest, well, I guess you could say, briar patches of rules in the country as against and blocking access to callings and professions and lines of work. And Beacon Center, with Hannah Cox giving a report here on the David Toulis Show, fighting these tooth and nail, fighting them through litigation and also through bills before the General Assembly. And we heard about one bill that would allow local fund outcomes for people on parole in local jurisdictions, a test program involving 4 counties. And also we heard about the Fresh Start program that would save people who have criminal records from being barred from obtaining licenses under the moral turpitude clauses that many commissions in Tennessee have as a barrier to entry. And so, for example, let's say you're trying to get into the hair braiding field, and you allegedly need to have a license to do that calling, but you have a drug case in your past, or you have a DUI case. You are, in many instances, prohibited from obtaining that license, and theoretically prohibited from entering that line of profitable service to your neighbor. Right? The state wants to prevent you from serving your neighbor because you had a DUI in your past, and you're involving yourself in a state-sanctioned, state-owned calling through the privileged application system. Right? We have the difference between a right and a privilege is this: a privilege is where the state claims ownership of a particular activity and bans the participation of anyone in that activity, and at the same time creating a permit system to get in. In other words, you come to us, you beg permission, you show the proper ID, you make the proper obeisance and pay the proper fees, give details about yourself, your address, your income, etc., your background, and then we will give you some grace and let you braid hair, let you run this car or provide that service, or embalm the dead and the like. And there are more than 100 such callings that the state of Tennessee, in its great pride and in its great self-confidence, claims as its own. If you have a right to do something, it cannot be permitted, okay? What I mean is, if you have a right, it can't be blocked. The access to that right, the use of that right, the pleasure of exercising that right can't be denied to you by anybody, right? If you have a right, it cannot be kept from you by a state person, a state board, a county commission, a city council, or any regulatory body that says, sorry, you can't come in until you come to us and get permission, right? If you have a right to do something, then you should just go ahead and do it. But some callings are very clearly claimed by the state. And Beacon Center at beacontn.org is where you can find out more about this organization and get its newsletter, is fighting that. And it's high time that Tennessee has such a labor going on your behalf and on my behalf. There's a ruling I read not too long ago about an abortion clinic in northeastern part of the state where the clinic was arguing that it didn't have to meet any of the rules, any of the medical facility needs requirement rules because what it was doing was serving a constitutional right. And I think, as far as I remember, it defied all claims as against its needing to have a license or needing to meet any kind of medical statutory rules to have access to its market. Right, that would be women who are mothers with their daughters and sons in utero, which sons and daughters are facing death. Right, and the clinic is there to kill them with Governor Haslam's blessings. Right, Governor Haslam and the county sheriff together will unite to protect that good soul in her ministry of self-liberation. And the clinic, I think, rightly and truly said, well, if you have a constitutional right to abortion, then nothing can stand in the way of the exercise of that right. Nothing. And I believe that's where the case stands. And that clinic is destroying children without license, without any sense of obligation to the state, which ordinarily would say, well, you can't do that until you fill out a certificate of need and get the approval of that certificate by the local board, right? That's the board that passes on such things as, mammography facilities and MRI facilities and the like. There has to be a showing of need, and the state gives approval. And that is, if you have a right, if you, my listener, have a right, it cannot be permitted. In other words, it cannot be cannot be made subject to a claim that it has to have a permit. Okay, just get that straight in your head. If you have a right to speech, free speech, one of the few rights we have left in our unitary consolidated federal nation, then you can't be told, well, you have to get permission to speak, right? You can't. If you have a right to protest, you can't be told, well, you can't protest here. You have to go to the free speech area, right? That's not freedom of speech. Many of these rules are simply unconstitutional, but because we know that to challenge such a system is very costly in terms of personal finance, personal time and effort, and abuse, we just comply. We just agree. We agree that, okay, well, I'll take my protest over there to the free speech area, right? Because here it's illegal for me to speak. It's illegal for me to protest. It's illegal for me to hold a sign, to speak on a megaphone or anything like that. And so I will simply comply with this and just go along with the system, because it is there, after all, for our safety, right? That's always the reason for these systems, that there is a pretense of safety. And yet I think you probably heard enough times the quote from, was it I don't know, Mason or Madison, one of the founders, who said that if you yield your liberty for a little bit of safety, you will end up with neither.
Intelligent people with all due.
We are here in Chattanooga left with a little, right? We have a little, but even if you have just a little, even if you are in the deepest part of the Soviet Union in its highest point, there still is liberty. There's even there, liberty cannot be entirely extinguished, even in a totalitarian despotism of that kind. Right? We have a totalitarian despotism of a different kind. It has a lot of velvet gloves on, but behind them or within them, there is, of course, still the iron fist, very, very much still the iron fist, and federal prison, federal courts, U.S. district courts. We have Joel Solomon buildings in every city. Well, not every city, but in many major cities, we have these U.S. districts in which there are hounded the free people, the dissenters, and an occasional private criminal. But I think that one reason we're not as prosperous here in Chattanooga is we haven't really defined some of these machines, some of these systems. And if we have courage to define them, that will go along with, if there are some people who are willing to define them with the support of others, then I think we'll have more prosperity. There'll be more capital in Chattanooga. We'll, if we become more independent over time, more independent from the state of Tennessee, more independent from the national government, more self-directing as a citizenry, as a population, if you will, with a kind of lococentric and other-centric perspective, we will all be richer. Again, we're not rich because we've defied a dictatorship, right? A Republican dictatorship. We're not rich because of that. But if we do defy it in this point or that, then hopefully there will be coalescing along with that act of independence, people who really want to work hard for their neighbors, right? Who really want to prosper with their neighbors and to prosper their neighbors in their businesses. And that's what the idea of local economy is all about. That's what free markets are really all about. 800-8949, 800-8949. We have before the city council a panhandling bill, and we have across the city various ministries that are devoted to caring for homeless people, devoted to caring for people who are out of sorts with their former circumstances, who are in a debased situation from their earlier lives. They've lost friendships, they've lost capital, they've lost savings, houses, jobs, and some of them, their very homes, right? They don't have a place to call home, and they are adrift. They are in difficult circumstances, and there are in the private sector many groups and aids to these people, often offering just temporary help, offering connection, offering network. And we're very interested in you, my listener, in your supporting these organizations and learning about them. They are there. Some take government money, many don't, and that may matter to you. But I'd say if they're local, run by local people, with largely private funding, charitable and church giving in their coffers, then we'll probably be better served by them than those that are simply extensions of Uncle Sam or the national government. And so we are wanting to think in that direction. There are a few spaces left, by the way, at the Generous Church event, which is coming up on the 17th of April downtown. It's going to be held at the Feed Company Table and Tavern. It says it's for church leaders. Now, I'm not a church leader. I'm a former deacon, but I'm not in a church in which I have any office at all. But it is for people who are service oriented. And the question at this very fun lunch paid for by the McClellan Foundation will look at this whole idea of capital. And capital in the area of grace, right? In the ministry of grace, which is the Christian church. How do we increase that capital? How do we use it? How do we encourage people to be generous in their giving? That would be their. Well, I guess the tithe is one thing that's, I would say, an obligatory claim that God makes upon you, and your increase. But then there's also beyond that, there is the gift giving to nonprofit organizations, to work, to people, to individuals who are doing godly work and helping other people with a maybe a God-centered perspective, but also with a human benefit as a result of that godly work here in Chattanooga County. The name is David Twillis. Love your neighbor by local. The number is 800-8949. 800-8949.
You can experience clear, healthier, younger-looking skin.
And your skin is good too. David.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on Nooga Radio.